Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Seaweed Brain, a Percy Jackson podcast, or rather, Seaweed Brain live from the Duat. I think that's what we settled on. We are a podcast that has primarily covered the extensive books of the Percy Jackson universe and the television show that is currently covering the Kane Chronicles, starting with the Red Pyramid. We're going to be talking about chapters 3 and 4 today with a very exciting special guest, so stick around.
Welcome back, listeners. I am Erica, joined as always by my co-host Carter, not Kane, not Beyonce, but Carter Nakamoto. Hello, how are you?
Hi, yes, not Beyonce. That's okay, though.
And we have a returning special guest today. It's Sophia. Everyone say hi, Sophia.
I feel like I'm an episode of Dora, where they're like waiting for like the silence for kids to apply. Hi there.
Can you say hi, Sophia? Sophia, we are talking about chapters 3 and 4 of the Red Pyramid today. These are Sadie's first POV chapters. So we're going to spend some time talking about Miss Sadie. But first, we need to know about your background with the Kane Chronicles.
I feel like Percy Jackson's such a gateway series into like the rest of the Gordon verse. And so I think I went straight from The Last Olympian to the Red Pyramid. I think in the books that I had checked out from the library, they had the first like chapter of the Kane Chronicles like as a bonus, which I love when books do that. That's like literally the first taste is free, and then you have to like actually like subscribe to it. So like that was how I got into the Kane Chronicles, and it was really exciting because it was like Egyptian mythology, and I think I was more into Egyptian mythology prior to Greek mythology. Just like that was just how I entered through mythology. I went like Norse, Egyptian, Greek, which is the opposite of how Rick went. And what's cool about Egyptian mythology from like my perspective, you talk about a lot of like Black kids in America, like African American kids. I feel like your first concept of as like Africa, like terms of royalty, is through Egypt. Like, okay, like you talk about African greatness, the first thing comes to mind is Egyptian, like Cleopatra, Ramesses the first, second, third, and fourth. Before you get into like Nubia, all the other West African royalties. And I think what's really cool is that like I think, especially coming from me as an African American person, I really liked the idea of stories of other cultures because it's so cool. Other cultures have this huge deep history, whereas as a kid I was like, I felt I don't really have that kind of root to like these long lasting like fairy tales that go way back to like, you know, the Grimm brothers or like, you know, European knights and medieval history in the Greek mythology. Egyptian mythology was like, okay, cool, like that's Black people stuff. Like I'm gonna dive into that. So when Rick had the Kane Chronicles, I'm like, that's for me. This is it. Like I was just so excited.
I'm glad that was your experience with it as a young person.
Well, because Egypt is already so prevalent in the mainstream already. We have like the Mummy, but it was really cool seeing it from this perspective.
The Mummy, God, yeah. I loved the Mummy as a kid.
And really diving into like some of the complicated stuff. So I would check out a book on mythologies, and Egyptian mythologies was like all the mythologies of the world, and like Egypt was the one I reread the most. There are a couple myths that I'm so hazy. It's been like a decade, so I can't remember everyone, but there are like ones in my mind that I'll think back to. So reading the Kane Chronicles, be able to cross-reference that and also learn more stuff and like Google's like, like, you know, Basset, and everything like that.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm trying to think about what I was up to as a kid because I didn't pull out, like I was pulling out those books, but they weren't about mythology. Like I totally missed the Egyptian mythology train. I only knew about Greek mythology because of Percy Jackson. And I think it's because all my books were about rocks.
Rocks?
Yeah. I was getting like the rock, like field guide to rocks and gemstones, minerals and gemstones, you know.
Oh, you're one of those
this
kids.
Is a thing.
Yeah, learning about amethysts and agates and whatnot.
Like Ignatius and whatnot. I think that
Fool's Gold.
Yeah. No, was it Pyrite? I think that's what it's called, Pyrite.
Pyrite, Fool's Gold.
Because it's pirate, and I thought like, you pirate something.
That's how you remembered it. Yep. Yeah. Me too. I still have my extensive rock collection. I have not been able to part with it.
Did you ever have one of those museums where you go like mining, you get a whole like box set of rocks?
No, exactly. Or like when I was visiting my like grandparents in Las Vegas as a kid, we would like go to like Mount Zion or whatever. The gift shop would have like the polished rocks that you could like scoop a handful of them into the little baggie.
Oh, we had like a tray. It was like a tray. They each had a label and everything like that. It was like a school field trip. Oh. Yeah, it was really cool. It's probably lost in the nethers.
Lost in the Duat.
Yeah, lost in the Duat, literally. But it was so cool. And being like, wow, I could be a geologist. Was not.
Yeah. I wish little Erica had the foresight to know that I would not be doing a podcast about rocks, though. Like, because I could have known so much stuff by now if I had put down the minerals and picked up the Egyptian mythology.
I think Egypt is just so different. I think the mythology of Egypt is so different from Greek mythology, and it's so much older. It's so interesting how it operates, which is why it's always so fascinating, because it's not like a standard, like, the gods are these distant things, where like they're more involved in their relationship with humans or mortals. It's way more complicated.
I mean, as a kid, I had no idea about the interaction between Greek mythology and Egyptian mythology. But now as an adult, I think that's something that I find the most interesting is how they evolved into one another, how the narrative of the mythology was affected by the influence of the other mythology. That being said, you read all of the Kane Chronicles as a kid.
Oh, yes, I did. That was like an intermediary before going into like the Heroes of Olympus.
And how much of it did you remember as I texted you 2 days ago and I told you to start reading the Red Pyramid?
It's all coming back to me. For some reason in my mind, I remember Sadie being like straight up white. I knew she was part of her sister, but like my childhood mind, I couldn't process biraciality. So I was just like, oh,
right.
She's passing, she's white. Reading the books as an older person with a more nuanced brain, I'm like, oh, okay, she can probably pass, but she probably still has a little melanin. It's really interesting to make that also a huge part of like her relationship to her dad and her mother, and why her grandparents decide to like keep her and not Carter. And I was just like, that's actually a real tea right there. And
yeah, for sure.
I think I clocked it when I was a kid subconsciously, but now as an adult, I'm like, oh yes, racist grandparents.
Exactly. Yeah, we've been enjoying thinking about that, like what we picked up on as a kid versus how clear it is now.
Yeah.
That was the family dynamic. We sort of noticed it when we were younger, but it didn't seem to jump out at us as much.
It's interesting. Yeah, he emphasizes that through Sadie's chapters a lot. Because I can imagine how insecure she must feel if she passes more than Carter does, and that it's kind of this weird thing where she definitely gets this more of an added benefit and privilege. I think we see that with the investigation, with their interrogation. She gets this added privilege that Carter doesn't get to have, and how that puts her probably in the weird spot, and how she definitely reacts more strongly to that because of that. And it's almost like she has to like defend her ethnicity. She has to defend her identity.
I'm also really interested in the way that Sadie's relationship with her like cultural background has this tension between her and Carter, where like she didn't grow up with their dad, she doesn't nor should not know anything about Egyptian mythology, but when she then does, it is like weird for her, but like kind of in a way exciting, because she's like, oh, maybe I can connect with this thing. And then for Carter, it kind of pisses him off a little bit.
I'm not gonna lie, when I first read the book as a kid, Sadie was never my top favorite character. I think it was because specifically of this. Because I do think in my mind, I coded her as a kid as white, and her being able to read Egyptian hieroglyphs and Carter couldn't. I was like, this is not fair. He's been putting in the work.
You were on Carter's side. You were like, she didn't travel the world with me and my dad. Like, why does she know how to do this?
I was just like, oh, classic white girls just coming in and reading hieroglyphs. Again, me and not being able to, like, as a kid, understand the nuance of that. And as an adult-ish, now I'm like, oh, I get it. It probably is exciting for her to have this connection. As an adult, I can definitely be more sympathetic in the excitingness of that and how cool that must be to have something where Carter does have the literal knowledge.
Something I forgot to mention when we were talking about chapters 1 and 2 was how the Kane parents met because they were both doing research in Egypt, but their mom was an anthropologist and she was looking for DNA. And I was like, is that something anthropologists do?
Well, it depends what kind of anthropologist. There are different types. I took a cultural anthropology class freshman year of college.
That's so awesome.
Oh, it was so fun. It was called Fantastic Frauds and Fantastic Claims. It was basically breaking down a lot of like, we would talk about Bigfoot, we talk about aliens building the pyramids, but deconstructing that, how we critically think about these claims and how all of them, more often than not, are based in racism. Black people couldn't build pyramids, therefore aliens. So. And there's like cultural anthropology, which is what the class I took was. And then there's also like various different types of anthropologies. But I want to say this, it kind of makes sense that the white mom was an anthropologist because that is very much a European coded like field that is rooted in like white supremacy. But what would she do with DNA? Because it's giving more like like geneticists, if anything.
At certain universities, there was certainly a schism around roughly the early 20th century between the like biological anthropologists and the cultural anthropologists. And the biological anthropologists are what we might today call eugenicists. If you're being
That was my question. This was what I was wondering about.
Or the other end is, I mean, like, there's still people today who refer to themselves as like human evolutionary biologists, and like there are some things that they do that are about, you know, like characterizing human locomotion and walking and trying to trace like the roots of cavities through different organisms that were related to humans over the course of the past 10 million years. But then there's also some of them who, you know, like
the bad apples of the group.
I don't know if bad apples isn't even the right phrase, because again, like the history of the discipline is one that is very fraught. And so to like make an argument that like the source of the like problematic impacts and problematic assumptions about race and sex and all of these other social identifiers is like, you know, something that occurs downstream as opposed to something that's at the root, and that there's some people who are just like, I don't know if the framing should be the other way, and that there happen to maybe be a few good apples in human evolutionary biology who are just like really interested in like molars and you know, like lower lumbar issues, which are like things that they focus on. But all of which is to say, I have many questions about that. Generally, like finding a DNA sample from like 3,000 years ago.
That's what I thought. I was like, isn't this a little sus? This is a little bit sus.
Took another class senior year. In our contextual class, we're talking about the concept of spaces, and we're talking about museums and like how they operate. And like we went to the UMA,
the University of Michigan Museum of Art.
Yes, thank you. They have these artifacts in this kind of this closet area. You can like access it, but it's kind of like not on the main floor. It's like this gallery of all these artifacts that they've like acquired from like global South communities. And I saw like there was an African hair pick. I'm like, some dude was probably wondering where'd my hair pick go, and it's sitting in this museum. And so someone claiming DNA. I'm like, why do you need my DNA for? Like, what do you need so and so's DNA for? What purpose?
Yeah,
and it's just ethical.
Carter, what did you do with DNA again in college? At Harvard, a place where famously eugenicists were.
That's where I'm referring to. Is Harvard has a department of human evolutionary biology that specifically was the eugenics department, and that's kind of like a lot of Harvard departments come from people choosing to not identify with people who like lost major world historical ideological arguments. Like the reason why there is a social anthropology department is because of eugenicism. The reason why there is a department of social studies is because of Nazism. And people at one point trying to purge continental philosophers from the philosophy department. And then at some point later on, people being like, well, we can't pretend that no one ever had good ideas in Germany. So we got to slowly figure out a way to reintegrate some of those people again and not have it be Nazism, but like also it's going to have to be somewhere else now. Anyway, I did do some work on genomics. I did take like a couple of anthropology classes about the construction of race and DNA and in sciences and in general in American, you know, mythologies, story creations, etc.
Huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation about the history of eugenics in DNA studies. And thank you for following me on that.
I just want to know, what was Rose planning to do with the DNA? That's just my question. I don't know if it's ever answered in the later books, but if you're going to revisit this world, that's a question I need answered.
Okay, cool. Should we talk about the chapters for
today? Let's talk about the chapter.
Where did we last leave off, Carter?
We last left off in the British Museum. Julius Kane released 5 deities from the Rosetta Stone as a portal, and then subsequently disappeared into the ground because one of those deities entombed him and vanished him away, leaving Carter and Sadie in the museum in the rubble to deal with the aftermath. 3 of the deities that were released from the portal have not been accounted for, and we kind of don't know the identities of any of them, except that probably one of them was Osiris, and that Osiris may or may not be in some way affiliated with Julius. So we come to in the museum, we're whisked away, police are there. Sadie is at this point basically being held in her room by herself until she can be questioned again by the police. With her cat, Muffin.
I think what's really interesting about the way this chapter starts off is right from the get, it's a totally different tone she takes the mic.
I love it. I love the energy. I was telling Carter and Sophia, I listened to the audiobook for these 2 chapters, and the narration is like just yelling. It's just constantly yelling and like screaming, and like, especially when Sadie talks to adults, it's just so loud.
As it should.
Which I love.
I think I imagine whenever she talks to adults, she's like, and what?
Yeah.
Like, I hear it. And I think that's why I think I enjoy it so much more the second time around. Because Carter Kane is so timid, and he's so detailed, and it feels like very much like very respectful. Sadie tells it like how it is, and I appreciate it because it's so much more fun. Things are more vibrant, and it's a more of a dynamic narrator, rightfully so for her kind of character.
Yeah.
There is one major caveat I have to add about Sadie's narration, which is that they have a lot of very forceful Britishisms.
Yes.
We talked with our real life British person guest Fran about this last time. The first line that she says is hello with a U.
Hello.
No, I love
Excuse me?
I love it. I love the caricaturization of British people to like young American children reading this book.
I think that's fair.
British people are cartoons.
To me, the Britishisms being clunky helps you to like disassociate Sadie from her Britishness so that you can like her more. And for me, that was very helpful. The fact that between the HULLO and then her saying maths, you can go kind of a long way and be like, she could be regular. And the fakeness of it makes me feel like, oh, she's just pretending to be British. She's still, she's actually like the rest of us.
And that is what it feels like. Like she's pretending, she's putting on this thing of being like ultra super posh.
Overcompensating.
Yeah.
And we find out in this narration that she's only, like, she has lived in Britain for half of her life.
Yes.
From age roughly 6 to age 12, which is where we meet her. So I think that reasonably we would expect that she would be able to do a British accent, but the degree to which it is a default or the only default for her, I think is genuinely questionable.
Have I told the story on the podcast about the boy I know who faked a British accent for like 2 years?
I don't think so.
I was in a performing arts group as a kid, like at our local community theater, and this boy like auditioned and joined. I never met his parents. I never met his family, but I met him at the auditions, and he was British, and he was like, yeah, I'm from London. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Accent was, I didn't question it at all. And I feel like I had a pretty good gauge for British accents at that age, like because of consuming Harry Potter so heavily. And he was like in the group for like a year and a half, 2 years. And then one day his little brother joins the group, and his little brother is like, why are you talking like that? And his little brother is fully American. And I was like, oh my God, are you not from England? And he was like, yeah, I am. And his little brother was like, literally, you're not. Like, we're from Texas or something. And I was like, oh my God. I was like nothing but impressed. I was like, you lied for like over a year. That's impressive.
Acting.
There's this American Life story that is basically the same as this as well.
He said and scene. That's what he like.
His brother said and scene. Time to get back to reality.
Well, anyway, Sadie's pretty British. Yeah. We open in kind of like an internal monologue for her because when we reach her, she is by herself in her room, thinking, going through her things.
She's looking at a picture of her mom. People say she looks like her mom.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very, very interesting, this concept of her trying to fill her mother's shoes and be like the reincarnation of her mother, as we're talking about Egyptian mythology.
Exactly.
And, you know, being multiple people and multiple things at once.
Yeah.
Also, thinking about like biracialness, they were talking about like how gods have like animal heads, human bodies, because they occupy both worlds, the simultaneousness of like duality and identity.
Their duality.
I'm not sure if it was intentional, but like paralleling that with their actually being biracial, but I think it's a cool, interesting reading.
If you go back and listen to the first season of our podcast, I think I was given a platform to talk about how all the demigods are biracial. And now this is just carried further, like more and with more real world consequences in the series. I think we should talk about her inner monologue about her dad leaving her.
Yeah.
Yes. I think it's really interesting, her relationship with Julius Kane, because it's very distant. I think some part of her definitely does feel angry, but there's also part of her that really wants to, I don't know, like, I want to say please him, but she also like really wants to live up to him in this weird sense. She's upset he abandoned her, but all at the same time, she still keeps the cat, she still keeps her necklace that he gave her.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see her as a 12-year-old be able to hold intellectually this idea that it's not her father's fault, that they're not close, with also deeply feeling a sense of betrayal and abandonment. The way that she describes it, I think feels so accessible and lived in, where she'll like get like she will like throw around this amulet that she's been given by her father, but then in the end she will also like wear it all the time because she is able to sort of work through those emotions and come
Exactly.
back to this more rational understanding of what has happened, which is that it's not her dad's fault that they're not together.
Yes. Well, she is kind of like young and immature as a 12-year-old. She is very wise, I think. Like she has an emotional maturity, that is really makes her really sympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of sentimentality in her too. I think that's just what's really cool and beautiful, contrasting to Carter, who has lived out of a suitcase his whole life and has been told only to carry the necessities, where she carries a lot of sentimental things, both like literally and internally as well.
Yeah, she has a little bit more of the emotional awareness than Carter for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think it comes from like you raised and like you're socialized with kids.
Yeah.
You go to a normal school.
Yeah, Carter has homeschooled energy. Carter has homeschooled energy.
No.
He tripped and fell.
Googled how to start a conversation on a website.
Talk the talk. Swore I was his type.
Quick explanatory comma. We talked about Carter's amulet, which is the Eye of Horus, and it's drawn in the text if you are using a physical book, ebook. Sadie's amulet is drawn here. It is not named. I think it's named later on, maybe a few chapters down the line. It is the Tyet, Tyet. It's commonly known as the Knot of Isis. Knot. It looks like a knot. It looks like a piece of string tied in a certain way. Sadie describes it as an angel or perhaps a killer alien robot. And I think that those are like,
Love that.
they're pretty fair ways of visually analyzing it.
It's giving little 12-year-old girl wearing combat boots. That's exactly how that girl would describe it.
Yes. It's giving like warrior princess. Like, oh my god, you're so cute. Also, I'll punch you in the face.
Very that.
She does remind me so much of Meg from Trials of Apollo. But like middle of Meg's arc, Meg, where she's like not fully a 6-year-old, but not fully like resolved her trauma yet.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
Okay, interrogation scene. Sadie is joined in her room by one of the investigators, this like large man police officer, and the impertinence is striking.
The impertinence. This is where it went.
Oh yeah, she'd get along with Percy.
Sadie, I loved her giving back sass to him. But it was also, for me, this is so triggering. He's like, why would you die in Egypt? Da, da, da. And again, as a kid, I'm like, why is he so pressed by Egypt? But as an adult, now realizing Egypt and being like an Arab country,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh,
yeah,
okay.
There are like a few, I would say, phases of the interrogation. Phase 1 is giving classic kid experiences something fantastical, authority figures don't believe it. But Sadie is immediately from the get-go like so much ruder than all of those other kids would be. Like she does not consider for a second that the investigator is right and that she hallucinated things. The lines are so funny. Like they're genuinely very original. When she said her response to the investigator is, "I'm not lying, Inspector, and I think your eyebrow is trying to escape." Who says that? Is that an idiom?
Literally took note of that line as well. I was like, that is such a stunning observation.
It's what's crazy is that I remember reading that line for the first time as a kid, being like gagged, and then when I read it, it was like it was like a twice full gag because I experienced it in the past and in the present at the same time. I'm just
yes.
Yeah,
I agree. I had the same experience.
Yeah, I was like, wow, that's genius. Like she gagged him.
Yeah.
And she has no fear of being in that situation. And obviously, like we said, like, I mean, part of that has to do with like her privilege in that situation as opposed to Carter.
Exactly, 100%. She can just mouth off like that. Because I know when I was reading, I was like, oh, I could never do this. This is the police officer.
Mm-hmm. She's in the attic, right? Like her bedroom is in the attic. It gets mentioned. And so the investigator has to crouch down in order to talk to her.
Yes.
Like back is bent.
People come to her level. Like she doesn't sit down. She's like, oh, you want to take a seat? He's like, no, I'm going to stay standing.
Exactly. Powerful power move on her turf, all of that.
Yeah. It's giving like MBA Six Sigma, like I will win the negotiation by making your posture bad. Phase 2 of the interrogation is basically the investigator trying to get her to corroborate a hypothesis about basically Julius being a terrorist.
He presents it like the prisoner's dilemma. He's like, your brother's already confessed to this, so we need you to corroborate. And instead of conforming to this, she just flat out just does not engage at all. She's like, no, it happened. My dad didn't do anything wrong. Carter would never do that. And like she just completely just does not engage, which is great because she doesn't have a close relationship with either of them, but she rides or dies for them.
I think the way that she denies it is very good at further characterizing the relationship, especially from her perspective, where it's not just that she says, like, my brother's a good person, he wouldn't do that. Like, if you're a little bit reading between the lines, what she's actually saying is, like, my brother's too much of a coward to do something like that. My brother doesn't think for himself. He would blindly follow my father's line. You're lying, is like implicitly what she's saying. To me, it was so funny.
A truly unbelievable gag for a girl who only sees her brother twice a year.
Exactly.
And it was also an accurate gag.
It is.
Because we know she's right. That's the piece that helps us to like sink into the relationship further, is that we already understand that she's correct, and that the fact that she would say this is like an integral part of their dynamic. That like when they're together, it's her like just
Also-
yelling at him and criticizing him for not standing up for himself and carving out his own identity.
It is. I think what's also kind of funny is that it's very much giving like, oh, I can make fun of my brother, but you can't say that because that's my
Yes.
brother.
And she also, like, I think that throughout this, like, she doesn't name it, and I think that the degree to which she is thinking about Carter as being more vulnerable to racism from the investigator, like, that's not made explicit.
Yes.
We don't, and I don't think we necessarily even can guess that well from the text, but it does seem clear that she is really ready to pick out signs of the inspector treating her differently and treating her as though she is separate from her family.
Like, why do you think I'm like not their kid?
Exactly.
Because I think she picks up on the fact like he doesn't associate her with like Julius and Carter. I love that she was able to clock it and then act accordingly.
Yeah.
And she kicks all of it off by specifically like there are many gags to be given in this set of dialogue, but in the beginning, the investigator is trying to basically project a narrative onto her that she is like a passive, placid bystander to this, and that her brother and father are extremists that she just kind of witnessed do these terrible things. And her first response is, quote, she says, "Against my will, I chained the curator in his office."
Admitting to a crime, honestly, I love that.
It's very slayful the way that her reaction at basically every phase is to say, your narrative is wrong. I will prove that you don't know what you're talking about, even if it means implicating myself. Because she knows. She has an understanding of what the consequences are going to be for her, and that they're not going to be extreme. It's a gag.
I love her.
It's a great gag.
I think the one other thing that we would say about the narrative that the investigator is trying to put on them is that the investigator's narrative actually is Black Panther. Like,
yeah, it is.
It's not just that he says extremism. He says there are extremist groups in Egypt that object to Egyptian artifacts being kept in other countries' museums. These people might have approached your father. Perhaps in his state, your father became an easy target for them. If you've heard him mention any names, listeners, you might have clocked the fact that when the investigator says Egyptian artifacts being kept in other countries' museums, we're not specifying that the other country in question is England, which, of course, you, listener, will remember famously colonized Egypt for many years. That colonization being the instrument for the movement of all of these artifacts from Egypt to the British Museum.
Grave robbing.
Not to beat a dead horse, to hit a nail over the head too much with this, but this is not something I remembered from the first reading of the book, that the investigator basically is like, oh, other people are going to clock that it's maybe like wrong for this to happen, and so probably that must be what happened here. Like, it's almost, it's a thing of like telling on yourself very hard.
It really is. What isn't England telling on itself, to be honest?
That very that, yeah.
Honestly, I'd have been like, hey, what? Like, maybe we did do it, and maybe you should return them. If I was Sadie, like, what?
The fact that our introduction to Sadie in her narration is her yelling at a police officer.
Yes.
The one like plot note that we should make is that Amos arrives. Amos, who Sadie also like doesn't know who he is, but like kind of thinks he's familiar, and at this point is like, he seems like maybe not an op, but I'm not totally sure.
He was the one who showed up outside of Sadie's house.
Yeah, like she sees him and she's like, oh, he looks sympathetic, but vague. We're undecided on him.
Doesn't trust him.
I don't know about all that.
But also, intriguingly, the cops seem to know who he is.
Ba-ba.
And he has an alibi. Okay, chapter 4. Sadie's interrogation is over. We're doing group interrogation now. We're in the living room. The grandparents are there. The grandparents are literally cartoon characters.
Cartoon British people.
They are.
I think, like, Ferb's grandparents are literally these grandparents.
Oh my god.
I could be, but like literally the way that they describe them, they have like cartoon proportions. They have cartoon like relationships. Like the grandfather is like a rugby player whose eyes are really like deep set into his face, and the grandma is like pale and thin and like tall and kind of waifish and placid.
Is that not literally the Dursleys as well?
Oh, it is. It fully is. And also choosing rugby as a sport is just such classic British. Because honestly, it's the way I read that and kept it moving. I don't know. I didn't know what rugby was. I knew it was something, some British fake sport or something. I didn't Google it. I was just like, okay.
You didn't care enough to Google it. You said, okay,
exactly.
British people.
And that's why it's perfect. And that's why it's perfect. Because that's the perfect nondescript British sport. I still don't know what rugby is. I still don't know how you play. Is it like lacrosse?
It's closest to
You're
football.
asking the worst people
If you're thinking of an analog to an American sport, it's closest to football. So we have this description of the grandparents. They are cartoonish, very British descriptors. We also get Sadie describing Carter for the first time.
This was weird. I'm sorry.
This is so funny. Oh my god.
I thought it was hilarious, but Sophia, you should expand on that.
Oh, because I have a younger brother, but like he can be like she said he can be good looking. I'm so sorry. I don't register my brother at any level of. I mean, as an older adult, I can force myself to. But as like a 12-year-old kid, I was just like, he's just my brother.
But she was like, my friends say he's hot.
My friends think he's hot.
Yeah.
I think that is something that people experience who have siblings. You like hear other people talking about your siblings and you have to compartmentalize and deal with that.
Yeah. Or if you have a hot dad. We used to make fun of our friend for having like a super hot dad. And I know it probably ruined his life. And I'm really sorry about that.
It probably did.
His dad was a librarian. Are you kidding me?
Librarian and hot? I'm so sorry.
It probably did ruin his life, actually. Yeah, ooh, tough. But okay, the Sadie's description, though, specifically being like, it takes like a whole paragraph, but it could be boiled down to maybe he could look nice if he didn't wear such garbage clothes. Hilarious. That is amazing.
She's like, I'm posh British.
It's like, yes, I can give you a compliment, but it's going to be backhanded. Because he does just a dork.
Yes. It's like a useful comparison because like from his perspective, all we get is he's kind of a dork. You know, like it would not occur to him to describe his own appearance. He would have no idea how other people perceive him, like all of these things. And so for all of that to come from Sadie, who is like super judgmental, but also will like kind of give a compliment. And also all of these descriptions are downstream of her being like, oh, he looks like he's in bad shape. Like it starts off with her trying to be sympathetic to the fact that he is reeling from the fact that their father is maybe dead or kidnapped. And she cannot help but immediately veer into, well, but he always looks terrible because he dresses like garbage.
And that's what I love, that sibling energy, because it's such a core thing. I think there's this love of like tearing your sibling, well, they would say tearing them down, but you knock them a bit.
Like keeping it real.
Yeah.
Like I think that if she genuinely thought he was wearing nice clothes, she would have said it, but she really does not think so.
No. And I think it's so funny because he's in the room with her because they're recording this. So he's right next to her. He's like, yeah, he was looking terrible and he wears really bad clothes.
Yeah, exactly. I also think it's so funny, having listened ahead a little bit, the way that Sadie interjects into Carter's narrative so much to like insult him and make fun of him. Carter always has to be like, Sadie, shut up. But Sadie rarely has to be like, Carter, shut up, you know?
Carter's sister takes it, as he should. Like, I'm sorry, that's like the brother-sister dynamic. He just takes it.
Correct.
Just always one.
So we're having this family conversation with the investigators. It is revealed that Carter did not lie and say that the father was a terrorist, to the surprise of no one. So now we have everyone in this room and the investigators are threatening to throw both of the kids in prison or jail or something to punish them in some way for the supposed crimes of their father. The grandparents are trying to defend them, but that's the thing. There's no lawyer. It's giving wild police overreach.
Like, honestly, I want my lawyer. Is Miranda rights an international thing? Because
there's an analog to those rights in the UK. Yes. I do feel like there are additional protections you would be able to get as a US citizen in the UK.
Like, I'm like Annabeth in that scene. Like, am I under arrest? Like, what's like legitimately what's going on? I'm so sorry, but like, you're not gonna come up into my house, spout theories of my dad being a terrorist. Like, I record this. You're gonna be canceled. You're gonna lose your job. Like, just first and foremost.
The grandparents' reaction is so like, it is garbage. It is nothing. They're just sitting there, like meekly talking to these police officers and being like, "Oh, don't punish the kids," even though probably, I guess their dad is now a terrorist. I don't know.
They're so shady about that.
The grandparents, as we find out later in this chapter, 100% know what's up. Like
That's the crazy part.
Yeah, they know what's going on, and they're still like, yeah, their father's probably a T-word terrorist.
Wild. Unhinged.
That's like such classic British racism.
Classic British Law and Order. And did it even work out for them? No, their passing granddaughter was also going to be punished by the law because they refused to say anything interesting or, seek out basic legal help. They're not saying anything other than just like, oh, we're good people. You know that we're good people. Like you should be nice to our lovely granddaughter. And also grandson.
Not grandson.
Kane, wait, what is the maiden name? Do we know what the Fausts, right?
Faust.
Faustian Devil.
We're in the anti-Fausts hate club.
Oh, 100%.
Honestly, her name, I was just giving Faust. If it's Faustian Devil, the Faustian deal, I was just thinking, I don't know what deal the devil you've made.
Oh yeah, you know that Rick doesn't choose names arbitrarily. Like that was fully intentional. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm just
dealing with the devil. Mm-hmm.
So that's about how this goes. The grandparents are basically doing nothing. Sadie keeps yelling at the police.
Icon.
Carter's basically kind of sitting there and quietly, placidly, calmly saying, we didn't lie. You shouldn't punish us because we didn't lie. You should help look for our dad. It's... Anyway, that's where we are for a while until mind wipe. The inspector abruptly... resets, changes course.
Jedi mind trick
Happens. The kids are getting deported instead. What?
That's still traumatizing too. That's still a pretty drastic thing. I mean, it's still like deported.
Yes. As a form of punishment, it's bad.
Interesting moment where Sadie is like, wait, but this is my home. And they're like, but you're technically a US citizen. So once again, messing with her perception of herself and realizing that she is still a member of this family in more ways than she is used to. It's all really interesting.
But she hasn't been back to her LA home in like 6 years.
Yeah, it's like she can live this like life far away from everyone and with her grandparents, but at the end of the day, she's still a part of this family. And she's going to face the very real consequences of that.
Yeah. And we find out that the reason, or rather the person behind the Jedi mind trick, if you will, is Amos, who enters. This is a sick entrance. Amos shows up immediately. We are given, I don't think they say this directly, but he is more fashionable than everyone else we've met. He is put together, crisp.
Amos is such a sick name.
It is.
Amos is a
do you
sick
remember
name.
Famous Amos?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Oh, the cookies?
Oh my god, you know what the cookies too? I thought that was a Hawaii thing.
What?
No, they're national.
Yeah, they're national. No, there's the black guy who had those cookies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then how come we met Famous Amos all the time as kids?
Because he lives in Hawaii.
No way. That's so cool.
That dude just chilling out in Hawaii, that's gangster.
He would just show up at events and stuff with his cookies. He was so nice. He always had like cool hats on.
He seems like a guy who had cool hats on.
He was there for the children. It's true. Yeah. Amos is cool. The pinstripe suit.
He's also got the glittery gold beads in his braids.
Gold beads in the braids. We get this detail later on that he smells good, like an assortment of like spices.
Oh my gosh.
He was a hotter brother. There was a hotter brother and it was Amos.
You think it was Amos?
I do think it was. The way he acts, he's like, the vibe is giving something close to like Morris Chestnut and the guy who plays Luke Cage. Like it's giving that. Like he's just like wow, cool, badass mother. Like
yeah. We should characterize the vibes because as he walks in, he isn't necessarily trying to be intimidating or cool, but power. He like walks in, immediately sits down and starts eating. He doesn't address anybody per se. He just starts talking and telling everybody what's going to happen.
And those cookies are burnt and he does not react. That's a respectful dude. That is a respectful. That's a classy dude.
Classy, elegant, unbothered.
Because he walks in so calmly and already the grandparents are like hot and bothered. Like
they're bothered just by his presence.
Grandparents are bothered and he dispatches them. He gathers them very quickly.
He does. It's like the Beyonce quotes, like, you're that bitch we caused all this conversation. And what he is, like he does.
He does. Mm-hmm. It's true.
He moves in silence. Like the way he's able to dismantle the police, not by like force, but by like subtle mind wiping. Like this is a man who's discreet.
Ooh, magic time. And they have this conversation like that goes over the kids' heads where they're saying all this stuff about superstition. And then Amos is like, oh, you think it's all superstition. And yet you found a place to live on the east bank of the river. And that's when you're like, wait, what river? Like the Thames? Like
exactly. That doesn't mean anything to us, but the grandparents are gagged. They immediately are like, whoa. Okay,
I was like, what river too? And I was just like, dang. I was like, I remember even the books. I was like, when I was a kid, like, wow. I was like,
whoa. Yeah. But then he's like, okay, kids. And he wins and he takes both Sadie and Carter.
Yes.
It's not even a fight. It's not even a fight. Because even like, Gramps is like, if I was a younger man, it's like, in what? In what, Gramps? If you're a younger man, in what? Would you be able to take Amos?
Well, that's the thing. It's not just a fight. It's not like everybody wants to keep both kids and are trying their hardest. Amos wins the argument here. It's hard for us to follow because we basically don't know anything that they're talking about or any of the lore that's happening, but clearly they have a mutual understanding and he convinces the grandparents that he is going to be able to do something for the kids and that they are in really important danger, that the grandparents understand that the police officers did not, you know?
That's what irritated me the most. I'm so sorry. Like, the fact that they knew. It's giving the Get Out scene where Rose knew and she hides the keys. And I'm just like, Rose, give me the keys. She's like, I can't do that. I'm so sorry. You let Carter almost go to jail because Carter was one who was going to really go to jail. Let's be very real here.
Yeah, they don't care about him at all.
Sadie was never going to see the inside of a cell, but Carter definitely was. And they sat there, oh, we want some more teas and crumpets or whatever. Like, no, I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm. But now we have to go to Brooklyn.
Yeah, we're taking a reed boat to Brooklyn from London. Erica, how do you feel about us going to Brooklyn instead of, say, other boroughs?
I'm so excited. Oh my god, I'm so excited for us to go to Brooklyn. Oh my god, let's get on the queue. Let's go to Brooklyn. Isn't it in Trials of Apollo? Didn't we find out it's in like Red Hook or something? Because they were sort of like by the water.
Oh, we definitely learned what neighborhood it was, and we know it's by the water. And it's like sort of in like a formerly warehousey part of town.
So we were guessing it was Red Hook.
Red Hook would make sense.
Yeah.
I don't remember additional details about like what neighborhood in Brooklyn it's in, but
we're going to find out next week, though, more about why it's in Brooklyn.
Yes, that's really cool.
Oh, yeah, I'm excited to go to Brooklyn. Back to the States, everybody.
Back to the States. Back to the East Coast. East Coast. Beast Coast.
It's so, there's something so like hilariously like I'm mature now, like from as a kid reading the PJO books and being like, I don't just know about Manhattan. I also know about Brooklyn. That's actually really cool stuff happens.
Yeah.
Honestly, they got the swinkiest pad. I remember as a kid wanting to like show up there because I'm like, this is actually like, this is the best crib. I think out of like majority of like the Rick Riordan verse, I think that they won.
Well, yeah, they have a mansion.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I want to be a magician.
No, literally, I was just like trying to look for the audio tape to be like, where's my imitation?
It's funny because like I never really was like, I want to be a demigod, you know? Like I don't ever really recall having that sensation, you know? But like I want to be a magician.
I thought I knew who my parent might be, but I didn't want to be involved with the child wars, soldier thing. You know, just like, that's for me. But magician, blow stuff up, really cool.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to come up with some closing questions for the Kane Chronicles, but for now, since we just did 2 chapters today, Sophia, will you, for our listeners, pitch why they should keep reading the Kane Chronicles?
Okay, that's a really good question. I'll pitch that people should continue to read the Kane Chronicles because I think that they have the best God Guardian in the books, in the Bassett.
Ooh.
I think that the Percy Jackson series was lacking because I feel like it was too much of a big role for Grover because Grover is still very much a kid. Tyrell wasn't as involved as much. But I think having that kind of like, she's like the den mom, like the house mom, something like that. That's a great anchor point because these kids are going through a lot. I think it's great to have that kind of older momish type character that's going to be more nurturing. Someone's funny, comedic, also ready to throw hands. But ultimately, that's the kind of like, she's like the den mom of the series. If anything else, read it for her because she was hilarious. I remember really liking her a lot as a kid.
Yes.
Oh, yay. Okay, I'm excited to keep reading. Sophia, do you want to plug anything?
Of course, like with my Substack, Analysis Paralysis. So right now I'm doing, as Erica knows, a very extensive deep dive and breakdown of the character of Annabeth Chase and how like they characterize her to be very soft and how important it is for the representation of Black girls in coming of age media, for which there is a lacking in that genre. And so, yeah.
Yes, Sophia's Substack is actually required reading to listen to this podcast. So
it's a great Substack. Yeah.
Follow our show notes. I literally downloaded the Substack app just to subscribe to Sophia's Substack. So do the same. Follow in my footsteps and click on our show notes link to find those posts and read them now.
Please. I do so much research. As Erica knows, I do a lot of note-taking for that. So please appreciate the work I put into it.
Yay! All right, well, we'll see y'all next time for chapters 5 through 8.
Bye, y'all.